Hey guys, this is Clinton Jeff from UnleashThePhones.com and this is my review of the Honor 6 Plus. The Honor 6 Plus is a very interesting phone that has two cameras at the back. I mean, why buy a phone with one camera at the back when you can get a phone with two cameras at the back at the same price? Where have I seen this before? Oh yeah, that's right. Didn't really work out very well for them either, did it? But hey, Huawei is a company that I've always been a little bit interested in. They've been pumping out some very cool things lately, like the Huawei Android Wear watch thingamajig. And Honor is kind of a sub-brand in the same way that Toyota has Lexus as a sub-brand. So I was very excited when I got to check out the Honor 6 Plus, and here's what I think about it. Alrighty, let's start with design. From the front, the Honor 6 Plus looks a little bit generic, but from all other angles, it kind of looks a little bit familiar. Towards the bottom, it kind of looks like an Xperia Z, especially considering the back and the front glass panels. But on the sides, because of that aluminum frame that goes all around, it kind of looks like an iPhone 4 or 4S. Regardless, the phone does look okay and does feel very premium. In fact, build quality is actually really solid. So solid in fact that Huawei says that the back panel is bulletproof, though because I'm a normal human being, I was not able to test that out, and hopefully you won't have to test out that feature either. But that being said, I did unfortunately accidentally drop the Honor 6 Plus one day. I'm sorry Huawei, please forgive me. And there was a tiny little hairline scratch that happened at the back. So this thing is definitely not indestructible. Measuring 150 by 75 by 7.5 millimeters and weighing 164 grams, the phone is stocky but is still oddly comfortable to hold and use. This is mostly because of the rounded corners at the bottom edges, which means it doesn't dig into your palm when you hold the phone. Considering the size of that phone, that is very appreciated, and most of the reason for that huge size is because of that huge screen at the front. At the front of the Honor 6 Plus is a 5.5-inch 1080p IPS LCD display, which equals a pixel density of about 400 ppi. There's still some bezel all around, so it doesn't look as slick as it possibly could have, but Huawei still managed a very impressive 74% screen to body ratio. The display itself is really sharp, and text and icons all look really crisp. Honestly, you won't really be able to make out individual pixels unless you hold this phone screen really close to your face, so please don't do that. Of course, viewing angles aren't as great as an AMOLED screen, but the display does get really bright, which means it's very easily usable in outdoor sunny environments. That being said, the auto brightness on the screen is a little bit moody, so you might have to turn it off sometimes. The screen itself is also very saturated, so it does make Huawei's colorful UI really pop, but all in all, it's a pretty good screen. Above the display, you'll have a centrally located earpiece with the front-facing 8-megapixel camera on one side. There's also an ambient light sensor and a proximity sensor hidden somewhere around here. Below the display, there's no capacitive touch keys because the Honor 6 Plus uses on-screen navigation buttons. Moving on to the rest of the phone, at the top you just have the lone 3.5mm audio jack with the infrared port and a tiny pinhole for the noise cancelling microphone. At the bottom of the phone, you just have the micro USB charging port with the pinhole for the main microphone. On the left side, you'll find no keys or ports whatsoever, but on the right side, you'll find the volume key and the power and screen lock button. You'll also find the main SIM card slot and the slot for the micro SD card. So here's a fun fact. In the Chinese variant of the Honor 6 Plus, you can choose to use a nano SIM card instead of that micro SD. Unfortunately, the Indian version does not support the second SIM, so you're gonna have to stick with one SIM card and one micro SD card. Not really a big deal, but kind of a missed opportunity. Coming to the back of the phone, you'll see the Honor branding right in the center. There's only one Honor logo at the back and there's no branding at all on the front, which is a huge relief considering most phone manufacturers want to throw their logo all over the phone. Also at the back, you'll find the two rear cameras and the dual LED flash with a tiny narrow little speaker grill towards the bottom. The glass rear panel has a very interesting pattern underneath it. At certain angles, it does tend to shine a little bit as well. But that being said, like with any phone that has a glass back panel, it does catch a lot of fingerprints, and I've spent a significant portion of this review video just cleaning that back panel. All in all, the Honor 6 Plus might not be the most unique looking smartphone in the world, but it still does have an interesting enough design. It's simple yet attractive, but has very decent build quality. Alrighty, let's talk about hardware. Like most Huawei phones nowadays, the Honor 6 Plus runs on Huawei's own chipsets. Yes indeed, just like Samsung, Huawei makes their own processors. Huawei's high-silicon Kirin 925 powers the Honor 6 Plus, and it offers pretty high-end performance, resulting in the UI being very smooth and quick overall with very rare instances of lag. It's kind of hard hard to explain how powerful this processor is, but the octa-core processor is supposed to be on equal footing with Qualcomm's Snapdragon 805 processor, which we saw on the Motor Turbo. Honestly, that processor is quite impressive for a phone in this price tag, and there was no hiccups or stutters at any point on the Honor 6 Plus. Even the most intensive 3D game will play just fine with no frame drops, except in extremely dramatic moments maybe. As always guys, I have a whole bunch of benchmark results right over at UnleashThePhones.com in case you want to see how powerful that processor actually is. Apart from that, there's 3 GB of RAM on board, which definitely helps with the whole multitasking experience. There's also 32 GB of internal memory, out of which about 25 GB is actually available to use. But hey, don't forget it does have that micro SD card slot as well. In terms of connectivity, the Indian variant does have support for Indian 4G LTE bands. There's also Bluetooth 4.0, Wi-Fi, GPS and even NFC on board. And like I mentioned earlier, there's also an infrared port so you can control your TV or basically anything that has an infrared controller. Okay, let's talk about software. The Honor 6 Plus runs Huawei's Emotion UI, which is based on Android 4.4 KitKat. Just like any other Chinese phone company Android interface, there is no app drawer or separate list of apps. Instead, all the widgets, folders and apps are laid down on a collection of home screen panels, and you can have as many of those panels as you want. It's a very iOS-like implementation, but for some reason all the Chinese OEMs are doing it. But hey, if you're not a fan of the UI, you can always install another launcher on top of it. For example, you can install the Google Now launcher, which actually has a separate app drawer. Still, Huawei's take on Android is very slick and generally good looking. It has a very clean but colorful aesthetic, and that high silicon processor definitely allows for some smooth, neat looking transitions as you navigate around or close an app. As you'd expect, there are some built-in software features and tweaks to differentiate this from stock Android. For example, the notification drop-down sorts all your notifications in a reverse chronological timeline manner. Just like you'd expect, there's also various toggles available here, as well as a brightness control bar. Apart from that, most parts of the UI can be customized thanks to the built-in themes app. There's literally hundreds of themes available, but I couldn't find one that looked like stock Android. Still, it is nice that you can customize this phone. You can even customize the lock screen, and even the on-screen buttons can be customized. For example, by default they come with the usual 3 Android buttons, but you can also choose a 4th button to have over here. In my case, I'm using a shortcut for the notification drop-down, which is very appreciated considering how huge that screen is. I should also mention that the Chinese variant of the Honor 6 Plus does not have any Google services built in. Thankfully, the version sold here in India does have all the Google services that you'd want pre-installed. There's a bunch of pre-installed Google apps, there's the Google Play Store, and there's Google Contact Sync all built in. Just like you'd expect out of any decent Android phone. Moving on to messaging, the Honor 6 Plus does have Swipe pre-installed, which is pretty cool because you can swipe from alphabet to type a word. There's also a one-handed mode which pushes the keyboard to one side of the screen, which makes it easier to type, because at the end of the day that is a really huge screen. But that being said, you'd probably be more comfortable typing with both hands, or you could always just install a third-party keyboard like SwiftKey. Coming to web browsing, Huawei has their own pre-installed web browser, but there's also Google Chrome installed as well. The combination of that powerful processor and that high-resolution large screen means that browsing the internet on the 6 Plus is a pretty pleasant experience. Similarly, multimedia is also a mostly pleasant experience on this phone. It's really pleasant to watch videos or just look at pictures on that huge display. But that being said, audio quality out of the headphone jack was not too great, and similarly the loudspeaker at the back isn't too loud either. Honestly, considering the price tag of this phone, I kind of expected better audio quality. But hey, let's talk about the most interesting part of this phone, the camera. Alright, now here's where things get fun. The Honor 6 Plus has a very interesting dual camera setup at the back, kind of like the HTC One M8 from last year. And just like the M8 from last year, the cameras at the back record depth information, which allows you to take a picture and then refocus later. Unlike the M8 though, both the cameras at the back this time around are very decent 8 megapixel cameras. The main camera has autofocus and an f2.0 aperture lens, while the secondary one comes with a f2.4 lens and is fixed focus. I couldn't find any real exact specs about this, but apparently the maximum aperture of the rear camera is f0.9. If that's true, that's actually quite amazing. These cameras work together to capture that depth information and can also capture different exposures for a single scene. This also means that the Honor 6 Plus is really fast at taking HDR images. To achieve all of this, Huawei uses a very powerful ISP with a triple IE graphics engine that the company says they've been working on for 2 years now. It's also worth mentioning that it uses the same Sony camera sensor that was used on the OnePlus One. Huawei's camera UI is pretty similar to all the other camera apps out there. Swiping on the right side will take you between photo, video or wide aperture mode, and there's also a little toggle for filters in case you want to use any of the pre-installed ones. Similarly, on the right side there's a toggle for flash and for the front-facing camera, but there's also a little button that takes you to more scene modes. There's a whole bunch of scene modes built in, including including a beauty mode, panorama, HDR. There's also an audio note mode, a best photo mode, and a watermark mode. But my favorite is actually the super night mode that comes in very handy if you want to take a low light picture. There's also a shortcut to the settings menu here which allows you to choose camera resolution, aspect ratio, and a couple more things. You can tweak how you want to capture an image or the exposure or white balance. But what is very interesting is that you can also choose to take a larger 13 megapixel shot which uses both the 8 megapixel cameras at the back. That is actually really clever and I'm surprised nobody else has thought of that. Coming to camera quality, images from the Honor 6 Plus are quite good with a good amount of saturation and plenty of detail. The camera also happens to be very quick at taking a picture, which is always appreciated. That being said, the dual camera setup at the back does have a couple quirks. Huawei uses the term wide aperture, but basically it allows you to tap on a certain focal point and then adjust the aperture, which is basically a fancy defocusing mode. You see, all those fancy depth of field effects are done using software, but admittedly it does allow you to take a picture and then refocus later. And when you focus on a certain point, all the surroundings are gloriously blurred out in a very fancy bouquet-like effect. Huawei's defocusing algorithms seem to do a better job than what HTC does, but it still kind of makes poor judgments now and then. Sometimes hair follicles get blurred out, or sometimes it's a random edge, which all take away from the DSLR-like effect that Huawei wants to achieve over here. Still, overall, it's actually pretty good. In low-light pictures, the focus point is still very finely chosen, but results are kind of lackluster, all things considering. Don't get me wrong, for a phone in this price range, that low-light performance is actually pretty decent, but considering the whole wide aperture thing, I was kind of hoping for even better results. The super night mode though does work pretty well. Of course, it does result in some loss in quality with a bit of noise creeping in as well. The super night mode is basically a slow shutter mode, so when you're using it, you'll want to make sure that you're holding the phone perfectly still because there is no optical image stabilization in the Honor 6 Plus. Speaking of which, the lack of OIS also means that video recording is a little shaky, but the Honor 6 Plus still manages to produce some very high quality HD videos. I should also mention that the 8 megapixel front facing camera is pretty good for selfies, though it kind of had a little bit of an issue with exposure. All in all, the camera on the Honor 6 Plus is pretty good. I just kind of have an issue with them using the aperture term to describe what they want to do over here, because it really isn't the most accurate way to describe it. As always guys, if you want to see how good that camera is for yourself, you can head on right over to UnleashThePhones.com and check out my camera samples. Okay, moving on to call quality. Call quality on the Honor 6 Plus was pretty okay, and I didn't have any issues with network reception either. That being said, call volume through the earpiece could have been much louder, and the loudspeaker at the back isn't loud enough for conference calls either. Okay, let's talk about battery life. The Honor 6 Plus has a massive 3600 mAh battery that is able to last for about 1 day of moderately heavy usage on 3G. On light usage, you could probably go a day and a half, but regardless, you're definitely going to want to charge this thing up every night. Alrighty, to conclude, the Honor 6 Plus is a pretty solid all-around high-end smartphone. I've been using it for about 10 days now and I've definitely enjoyed my time with it. But that being said, the price tag does put it awfully close to other equally compelling smartphones. For example, for a little bit more, you could get the HTC Desire I or even the Nokia Lumia 930 if you want to experiment with Windows Phone. And for much cheaper, you could get the OnePlus One or the Xiaomi Mi 4. To its credit, the Honor 6 Plus does succeed in being very simple and aesthetically interesting. And Huawei's high silicon processor definitely brings the kind of performance that you'd expect out of a phone in this price range. Heck, even build quality is pretty solid. And as far as Chinese Android OEM skins go, Huawei's definitely got one of the better looking ones out there. But all that being said, just like the HTC One M8, the dual camera at the back is more of a gimmick. The wide aperture is useful and somewhat functional, and camera quality is pretty decent. But apart from that, there's really nothing much to differentiate the Honor 6 Plus from its competition. Honestly, I'm not really sure what other compelling features Huawei could have thrown in to make the Honor 6 Plus stand out even more. Maybe they could have been a little bit more aggressive with the pricing. At the end of the day, the Honor 6 Plus is yet another great performing phone in an already crowded high-end smartphone market. If you do end up getting one of these, chances are you'll be pretty happy with it, but there's some serious competition around the same price. Alright, so that's what I think about the Honor 6 Plus, guys. As always, if you guys have any questions about it, you can let me know right in the comment section below, or check out the written review right over at UnleashThePhones.com. And hey, if you like this video, maybe hit that like button or maybe subscribe, because that would be appreciated. And that's about it. Thanks for watching, guys.